And so we move into our legislators and what to look forward to as the 8th Parliament reconvenes. Dr. Rashid Draman is the Executive Director, Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs. Dr. Draman, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning and Happy New Year.
Right. It's a great pleasure to have you join the conversation. Even before we get into what to expect as we move into this next session or as Parliament reconvenes, what would be your candid assessment of the 8th Parliament up to this point in time, the highs and the lows, the good and the bad? What would you say about the 8th Parliament up to this point?
When on January 7th this year, when we had the election of the Right Honorable Speaker from the other side, and when we looked at the numbers, split house, we were of the view that this was going to be a very difficult parliament if care was not taken. And the one key ingredient that was needed to make the parliament work and to make our country work was, consensus and a very good rapport, if you like, between the majority side and the minority side. At the time, most of us were not really of the view that we were going to see a kind of difficult relationship between the Right Honorable Speaker and the two caucuses, particularly the majority caucus. Now, 1 year down the road, if we have to look at this parliament, I think one would say the excitement that greeted the split parliament, which was the fact that we were going to have, at least for the first time, maybe oversight and accountability really at work. We're going to see a situation where the majority was not going to have a very easy passage, if you like, in terms of what we have seen over the years in the Fourth Republic. We're all hopeful that, these were some of the things that were going to happen. But when one sits down and looks at the first session, oversight and accountability, maybe I'll give it 50-50 because, we saw the first test, which was, approving the people who have to run our country. That was a situation that was quite disturbing because even the base of the minority accused that side of not living up to what was expected. Then we went into the budget session, which was, if you like, the most important, when it comes to the life of every parliament. And I think we are all witnesses to all the confusion that happened. We saw all the fights, which were not too good for the image of Parliament and for the image of our country and for the image of our democracy. So all these were very kind of low points in the history of the 8th Parliament so far. Then I think in terms of some of the high points, we saw the role that the Right Honorable Speaker played in terms of making sure that Parliament was properly resourced, at least during the first few months when the first budget was presented. For the first time, we saw some real negotiation between the executive and the legislature to make sure that the legislature has at least the resources that it needed on the basis of the envelope that we have overall for our country. We also saw, for the first time, at least, some kind of, if you like, activism on the part of Parliament when it came to the budget, because over the years, most of us had thought that our Parliament was in the category of just budget approving parliaments, where the budget will come every year. It's almost like a ritual, and then routinely it gets passed without very many questions being asked and without very many checks and so on. For the first time in our history, we saw a situation where the policy that underpins the budget had some challenges, had some questions, and so on. And I think up to this point, those issues have not been resolved.
Right.
So, I mean, these were some of the high points. And then also, some of the reforms that are going on, being implemented by the Right Honorable Speaker. One would say that perhaps if you look at them on their face value, you will be quick to conclude that maybe these are being done to hurt the majority side. But if you think about it, I think from an institutional point of view and from a kind of a longer term point of view, you realize that I think this is an opportunity because we've never had a speaker who was different from the president's party.
Right.
So it will really be the time to be able to do the things that over the years we've not been able to do because of the political arrangements. So that whichever party comes into power, whoever takes over the speakership in future, at least we have some reforms lined up and some of the things straightened out. Okay. And so I think this would be my thoughts on how things have played out so far. But let me be quick to add that I think, looking at what has happened over the 1 year, we also have to be measured in terms of our expectations of what really the minority side can do, particularly because in the political arrangement that we have, most of the issues are decided by simple majority.
Right.
So in instances where maybe the speaker, assuming the speaker will be in his seat at all times, and both sides are able to mobilize their members to be in the House. And really, we shouldn't expect very much in terms of whether the NDC side can really overturn things and so on and so forth. So I think this is just a message to the base of the NDC, just to make sure that the expectations are really measured.
Right. Thanks for those preliminary comments. So right before we go on to other matters, and there's quite a list of those that I'd like to run by you. But on the back of all that you've said, the good and the bad, and the ugly as well, in this first year of the 8th Parliament, we're heading into year 2, at least as far as they reconvene. What would be your ranking of the 8th Parliament on a scale of 1 to 10? How much would you give them for the first year performance?
Well, on a scale of 1 to 5.
1 to 10,
1 to
actually.
10. Yeah, sorry, 1 to 10. I think I would put them maybe at about 4 out of 10.
4 out of 10.
Yes.
Okay.
Mainly because, I mean, as I said, there have been some very ugly scenes in Parliament, which really, I think, constitute a very serious dent.
Right.
I think in our profile as a country that prides itself. And then with all the things that are happening, the two sides not, seeing eye to eye, and then also a lot of the business of the House. Because if you look at the last meeting, really they were not able to do very much in terms of passing bills and so on, because they were busy haggling and fighting over E-levy and all the rest of it.
Okay, so 4 out of 10, your score for this 8th Parliament in its first year. And I'm going to continue right from where you ended, the E-levy. It's one of the things that we're going to see on the chopping block very early in this 8th Parliament as it reconvenes. And there's good reason for that. We all know where we are. We find ourselves in dire economic straits, though we also know, or at least we've been told, that the economy is robust, but the E-levy is crucial. This is the same E-levy, Dr. Draman, that has led to the throwing of punches, that has led to our parliamentarians taking on, heavyweight status when it comes to boxing, which we've not known them for, this very issue. So, judging from what we've seen in the past, what do you think the way forward is going to be as the parties? They could have settled this at the tail end of last year, but they decided after that fracas in Parliament not to go back to deliberate on the matters, but to push it to this year. What do you foresee being the approach of the two sides, the minority and the majority? And do you think they can come to a good conclusion that would let the E-levy see the light of day?
Well, they can't come to a conclusion because, as has been said over and over, the NDC has taken a position that is for its, from its point of view, is zero. The MPP says it's 1.75. We were hoping that, I think, in all the negotiations and discussions that would have taken place, at least we would have seen some movement towards the middle in terms of maybe the NDC softening its position and accepting maybe some percentage that is better than zero, and then the NDC, the MPP doing same, coming down from the 1.75 maybe to some number. The economists are there; they can crunch the numbers and see what is realistic and so on. It looks as if up to this point, I think both sides have dug in and they are all sticking to their position. What I would see happening is quite simple. I think both sides know the implications of this particular policy, financial policy. The NDC is riding on the back of the fact that many Ghanaians are opposed to this. I think that's what we've heard over and over in their submission, because they argue that this is going to add a lot of pain to the already suffering masses, in their view, and so on. The MPP says we need revenues in order to alleviate the plight of our people, and so on and so forth. If we get the Right Honourable Speaker in the chair, the NPP side would have 138, the NDC would have 137. The E-levy will pass, and I think we'll put the matter to rest. That is, I'm just looking at the worst case scenario where both sides refuse to maybe to move from their current positions. The better scenario, which would maybe engender some good relationship between the two sides, would be a situation where, I think in all fairness, I would say the NDC would have to reconsider maybe its position of zero, because if you go into a negotiation, I mean, you don't come out with your original kind of position. And the MPP on the other side would also have to reconsider the 1.75. I mean, we heard yesterday the majority chief whip, Honorable Anodom Press, saying there could be some revisions and so revisions. I'm not too sure by how much and so on, whether that would be acceptable. That would have been a kind of a win-win scenario, where at least both sides will say, okay, now we have a kind of a situation where there's been some concessions and so on, and then we can accept this and then move on as a country. But I likely don't see that happening. So the worst case scenario is what is possible with the speaker in the chair. The NDC has its 137, the MPP has its 138, and the MPP will carry the day, the E-levy will pass, and then we move on as a country.
And of course, we know what the implications would be of that on our economy with the recent downgrade we've suffered, partly on the part or on the count of our failure to go ahead with the E-levy. So as far as you see it, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
Yes, indeed. I think, yes, I mean, let me keep emphasizing this, because if the Right Honorable Speaker is not in the seat, and then this matter has to be considered, I mean, we are going to see, I mean, the same kind of scenes that we saw in December, because then, I mean, it's going to be 137, because really the person who will be presiding might not be able to, I mean,
and that cat and mouse situation could pan out again. We've seen how both sides have reacted. The majority saying that no, and we nearly saw the second deputy speaker, the member of parliament for Fomena, actually, you know, maybe like some would suggest, attempt doing certain things. We've seen Joe Osei-Wusu himself states that I can vote, I can move from the seat, have the second deputy come in and go and vote. In case we have that scenario where, like at a point we couldn't find the Speaker of Parliament and then one of them has to sit, it means we would have quite a tricky situation on our hands and it would be pushing the law further. As some have suggested, maybe this would put us in good stead, because then it would force us to find out what exactly the standing orders, what the Constitution says, and what we should delineate clearly in court. Do you feel that would settle the matter?
Well, I mean, the court might settle the matter because, well, I mean, in my view, I think the standing orders are quite clear. You know, I sympathize with the position of the first deputy speaker. I think in terms of what happened, you know, in December, he or anyone who presides, I think because of the kind of situation we have, where the deputy speakers of parliament are also members of parliament, when it comes to the issue of quorum, I think I'm sympathetic to the view that they need to be counted. But when it comes to the issue of voting on the matter that the person is presiding over, I think that is where the problem begins, and that is where it becomes very, very tricky. And if there are different regions of the standing orders and the Constitution, then I think it would have to be settled in court. But you see, again, given the character of this parliament, I think we want to avoid going to that extent where, you know, the general view over the years is that whatever happens in parliament is a closed book. Nobody likes to get, involved, and another arm of government getting involved in the affairs of parliament. But if we have to end at that point, at at least it will settle the matter. But what it will do also is that, it will further, disturb the relationship, the cordial relationship that we are hopeful that could exist between the two sides, so that the business of the House and the business of our country can go on.
Okay, Dr. Draman, so just to focus on the Speaker of Parliament a bit, I just want to find out from you, what's your take on the recent bid when it comes to his security detail and the follow-ups from even the former Speaker, the immediate past Speaker, Right Honourable Mike Eronokwe, that he never had military, security guards and all of that. And we've heard from different angles of the conversation, the security ministry, the military itself. What do you make of it? Much ado about nothing, or is it back to situation normal when it comes to politics?
Well, first of all, let me say, I was quite surprised because over the years, having dealt with our parliament, over the years, I never knew that speakers of parliament had military protection. So for me, when this matter started, it came as a surprise because, like most of us, what I see is the police that escort our right honorable speakers over the years. Of course, I don't know who and who is in the vehicles that follow them. But for me, my fundamental question is this. Is that military protection, is it part of the conditions of service of speakers of parliament? If yes, then I think there are a number of questions, people have a number of questions to answer. That is on the side of the military, on the side of the executive, and so on. If no, then I think there are a lot of questions on the side of Parliament, the administration, and the office of the Right Honourable Speaker.
All right, Dr. Draman, so my very last bit to you, final bit, and you can maybe expend just a minute on this. There's been a lot of talk looking at our economic situation that the three arms of government ought to be doing more if they are calling on all of us to tighten our belts. Yawning debt to GDP ratio, job creation, unemployment, and all of that. I've run this by a number of those we've spoken to this morning, and I just wanted to find out from you, do you think it would be expedient, for example, to call on members of parliament among the three arms of government to, for example, cede their rights to free fuel or to cut down on it when it comes to importation and the benefits they enjoy and all of that? Would it be a step in the right direction to call on those at the helm of affairs to also say, we're feeling the pinch, you should too, if you're telling us to tighten our belts? What's your take?
Well, I think, my take is what is good for the goose is good for the gander. If we are going to call on members of parliament to maybe cede certain privileges and so on in order to improve our economic situation, I think so must it be for all the other arms of government, because we don't have to single out parliament,
right,
and try to put it on the spot. The executive must do same, the judiciary must do same, and let it be seen by everyone that our leaders are showing an example, and they are leading by example.
Okay.
And I think that would be my take on it. But to single out Parliament, I think would be quite unfair.
Well, my take was not to single them out. That's why I mentioned the three arms of government. But Dr. Draman, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. Dr. Rashid Draman, Executive Director, Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs. We're winding down on the AM show, but in the next 9 or so minutes, we're going to be taking some of your views about the Black Stars of Ghana. Are they going to soar against the Comoros Islands today? We find out when we return from this break.